Hey everybody! So today we're going to continue on with the nodal axis and the nodes in specific houses. Today we are going to talk about the nodes along the 2nd and 8th axis, or in the 2nd and 8th houses. So let's start with the south node in the 2nd house. Oh, and just as a disclaimer, like I've done in the past, these are just some ideas about things that you might see happen or feel that fit when you look at the north and south nodes in the 2nd and 8th houses. This is not like gospel. It doesn't have to exactly fit when you chart weave. You might find that it does, and you might find that it doesn't totally. This is just kind of to get your creativity going, get your intuition going, just, throwing out some possible ideas. And then you run with them, you take them, and you run with them yourself, just to start out. Okay, so the south node in the 2nd house. 2nd house, the house for, the south node story, past life story, or just what you're comfortable coming into this world with, feeling, operating, where you feel comfortable operating, however you want to think about it. 2nd house is like the environment, the backdrop, the where or what area of life. So 2nd house is 2nd house is resources. 2nd house is money. 2nd house is values, things along those lines. So when you see the south node in the 2nd house, you might be looking at somebody who, for whatever reason, and there could be a whole, myriad of reasons for this. It might not just be one thing, it might be multiple things. But you are probably looking at somebody who is pretty concerned with their resources, with their money, with their values, even, and from a previous lifetime, or just they come into this lifetime comfortable in these comfortable doesn't always mean easy or good, right? But they're comfortable within these domains. Now, there's also a sense of survival with the 2nd house. Surviving. You could be dealing with somebody who was very focused on survival, on surviving in the physical world, because like the 6th house and like the 10th house, this is a physical house, a physical world house. Now, that doesn't always mean that they struggle to survive. Sometimes it certainly can. That would depend on where the planetary ruler of the south node falls, any squares to the axis, those sorts of things. You'd want to take all of that into consideration. But survival is usually a pretty big deal when you see the south node in the 2nd. Perhaps their focus was solely on that. Perhaps they had to. Perhaps it was forced. Sometimes it's like a force sort of thing, and sometimes it's just where the focus was. So you're probably dealing with a backdrop revolving around those things. Values are another thing. What this person, how they dealt with their values. I could see that playing in as well, though that is more of a how than an area of life. But even so, I wouldn't rule that out as tying in with the 2nd house. I wouldn't rule that out. I would still keep that option open as a possibility in some way. Usually the focus is more, because the 2nd house is like, the 2nd house is the resources and the money and those sorts of things that you generally speaking, it's the stuff that you make yourself, that you amass yourself. You might not always find that fits, depending on what the rest of the nodal story is saying. But generally, you can think, my cards are blowing away. Generally, you can think about it like this person was the one focused on their resources or on their money or those sorts of things. Generally, I would go with that. But again, if the nodal axis story is speaking to you in a different way, then roll with that. Okay, so then we move to, I'm going to put something over this real quick so they don't completely blow away because it's windy. Okay, so then we move to the North Node in the 8th house. And the 8th house is a whole bunch of shit. A whole bunch of stuff can fall under the banner of the 8th house. But when you're looking at an 8th house North Node, some things you might be looking at is the person wanting to, there could be something about the person wanting to rely more on other people or on other people's resources, especially if they're coming from a previous life where they were completely reliant upon their own. Maybe this time around they needed to learn how to be more reliant on somebody else's, or perhaps they needed to learn how to share with other people. There could always be that as well. That could always be possible, since the 8th house deals with, other people's money, loans, all of that kind of, those sorts of things, other people's resources. You might also be looking at somebody who wanted, the 8th house is very much like a soul merging sort of house. Perhaps from a previous lifetime point of view, they were way too, they didn't have time for that. They didn't feel like they could engage in that. Maybe their sense of survival wouldn't let them. They didn't feel like they were able to. So having a North Node in the 8th house might point to this, might point to, needing to find somebody or deeply soul merge with somebody this time around. That's always possible. They might need to, the 8th house is also pretty transformative, right? On the card, we have like transformation and metamorphosis and all those things as keywords for the 8th. So there probably is a sense of wanting to transform or to go through metamorphosis with the North Node in the 8th. How exactly that comes to pass would depend on the sign that the North Node falls in and everything going on with the Nodal Axis story. But that is also something else that I would take into consideration here. All those sorts of things. Really, the 8th house, because the 8th house kind of covers a lot of things. Going into the place between the conscious and the unconscious also seems like something necessary for, or that could be necessary for 8th house North Node people. Obviously, I'm not saying that people that have their North Node in the 8th house shouldn't live in the physical material world. I'm not saying that, because that's not realistic. But there might be a need to maybe loosen the grip on the physical material world, where the South Node would be in the 2nd house, and move more into that place between the conscious and the unconscious, understanding their own psychology, perhaps. Those sorts of things could be possible. Now, we'll do it in reverse. So here we'll be starting with the South Node in the 8th house. Okay, now I won't lie. This is, to me personally, and this is just through clients' charts and things like that I've had. And even people that I've known personally in my life with the South Node in the 8th. But it's not just a personal thing. I've noticed it with clients too. There does tend to be a chaotic sense to South Node 8th house people. it's not necessarily their fault, right? I'm not saying they are chaotic, but they do tend to attract chaotic situations, though they could be chaotic as well. South Node, 8th house. I do think that the person, whether they like it or not, okay, whether they like it or not, there may be a comfortableness with chaos. That's not universal, may not always fit, but I do find that there is something chaotic about these people's lives and the way that what they attract, kind of what they're, and when I say comfortable, it's not necessarily comfortable to them, right? It's just known. That's a better way to say it. It's just what they know. It's what they know from a previous lifetime. It's what they know. There is, again, it might not always fit, but I find that there usually is some kind of element of chaos involved. You might not find that fits when you chart weave. Like I said, I don't always find that it does. There are times that it doesn't, but my mind does tend to drift there. It does tend to drift there. You know, the 8th house is pretty extreme. It's a pretty extreme place. So I might also, and this is kind of also where the chaos thing comes from. Chaos can be a lot of things. But I might also think that somebody with the South Node in the 8th house, the backdrop of their life was extreme. There was something extreme about it. What exactly that was, again, would depend on the sign the South Node falls in, the rest of the Nodal Axis story, but there is usually something kind of extreme about it, about where they come from, what's known to them. Because this is the house of other people, right, of other people's resources, there could be too much reliance on other people's resources. This could be anything, right? This could be money, this could be anything. Or a comfortableness, even if they don't like it, there could be a comfortableness there with other people's resources, money, all of those kinds of things, depending on this or feeling like they have to depend on this. That's possible. Or even, you know, since this is a house about deep and soul merging relationships too, perhaps they are most comfortable in a relationship like that. Does that mean they're always good relationships or easy for them? Not necessarily. But they might be comfortable there. These are just some ideas. So then we'd move to the North Node in the 2nd house. So for this person with the South Node in the 8th and the North Node in the 2nd, they're wanting to rely on themselves. They're wanting to learn how to rely on their own resources, on their own money, on themselves versus relying on a deep and soul merging relationship. They are wanting to let go of the chaos, should any exist. Wanting to let go of living in an extreme way or putting themselves in situations where they have to live in an extreme way. Sometimes these aren't like the person's fault. They just end up in those sorts of situations. It seems like it just kind of happens. Almost law of attraction like, right? So the North Node in the 2nd, they're wanting to let go of all of that and live in a more simple way. Simple. That doesn't mean that they don't have deep soul merging relationships. That doesn't mean that at all. It doesn't mean that they can't ever rely on anybody else, but the goal here does seem to be quite a bit of self-reliance. That does seem to be very, very paramount with the South Node, with the North Node in the 2nd. It's pretty important. There are other things that you could, there are all kinds of things you could throw in here. This is getting kind of long, so I'm going to stop. But these may or may not fit. They might fit great for you. They may not. Take what you want and leave the rest. Let your creativity and intuition go wild. So I'm going to get going. If you want to follow us on Instagram, you can find us at Let's Fuck with Astrology. I'm at Saturn Season Astrology on Instagram. Natalie is at Avaternal Astrology on Instagram. If you want to subscribe on YouTube, you can search for Let's Fuck with Astrology in the search bar. If you do the Reddit thing, come check us out on Let's Fuck with Astrology on the subreddit. And if you're interested in the star cards, go to letsfuckwithastrology.com/star-cards. Okay, y'all. I'll see y'all later.